as let's move into our Maester study. So we did this. We're doing a 3-part series here on Viserys Targaryen as we get ready for House of the Dragon. And so just kind of like, who is he? What is, what's he about? He's gonna be he is the first person cast in the series we know so far. And obviously it's his relationship with Daemon Targaryen that really is kind of the early focus of what becomes the Dance of the Dragons, the split between the Targaryens, the blacks and the greens. And what ensues is the bloodiest, about civil war in the history until maybe the War of the Five Kings or Robert's Rebellion. I don't know. They're all pretty bloody. This one honestly feels the most like backstabbing and pretty brutal just because of the use of dragons.
Yeah, exactly. I think Sir Matthew Perry kind of said in his Raven to us initially, dragons, and more dragons, right? That's the thing with this is it's going to be another level, something that is, it's going to make it cool. I think it's going to make it really neat for folks to go back and see what this was like. More Targaryens, maybe an extra element of magic, and then dragons. So it's pretty cool. In our first part, we talked about Viserys Targaryen just becoming king after the old king, who didn't have any really, his sons had died, and it was either going to go to his granddaughter or grandson. And you had the Council of 101 AC, and Viserys is picked. He's picked to be, king. The council decided, and you kind of set this precedent that a male heir is going to, that needs to be a male. I mean, they basically, they didn't directly say that, but I mean, because they chose Viserys, over Laena Valerian, that's sort of the precedent that they set. And so here we go. Now, we talked in part 1 about his first marriage and just what happened there. Rhaenyra Targaryen being born, and then his wife passing away in childbirth to another son, the mocking that his brother made in the streets, which was dangerous move by his brother, because his brother Daemon Targaryen is very power hungry and wants to just he would love to be next in line. I mean, he kind of is that power hungry, even though it's like his brother, but he's kind of almost hoping his brother doesn't have an heir, which is wild. So Viserys, though, before he gets married, before he goes into his second marriage, which is what we're going to talk about today, he names Rhaenyra Targaryen his heir. And everyone kind of swears and agrees and says yes, and they just recognize her as his replacement. Now, I think some people thought because he tried to have a son, did not work. He's younger, and so at the urging of his counselors, he does get married a second time. He gets married to Alicent Hightower. Again, I think Sir Otto Hightower probably had a lot to do with that. The Hightowers are political schemers. The Hightowers are in and or around a lot of power, and they have an interesting history. We could go into Hightower lore and really dive more into that. But yeah, they're in this, and Alicent Hightower is his new 18-year-old bride. And she does give him children, Sir Matt. She gives him several and gives him a son as well. And so the big takeaway from this second marriage is that he has a son, Aegon, but Aegon is the second born, right? So Rhaenyra would be your firstborn, but then he's the firstborn son. He's already said that his daughter Rhaenyra from his first marriage is going to take his place, is next up. And honestly, Sir Otto Hightower, his grandson now would be Aegon, because his daughter Alicent is married to the king. You know for a fact that Sir Otto Hightower wants his son to be named heir. And he badgers him to the point where Viserys basically says, "You're done. You're done as hand. I can't have you around. I have named Rhaenyra my heir, not changing that." And he keeps hounding him, so he relieves him of his duty as hand of the king, and he names, is it Lionel Strong, right? Mm-hmm. The Lord of Harrenhal. He names him as his new hand. So, that's pretty wild. Initially, Sir Matt, there's some good. There's some, good moments, I guess, between Rhaenyra and Alicent. Like, it's okay. Until she has her firstborn child and stuff kind of changes there. Everyone plays nice. Alicent Hightower kisses Rhaenyra. This is her stepmother. They're accepting, but things quickly change, right?
Doesn't that feel like so much of the Dance of Dragons is there? You go from these moments where it's like there's animosity and there's tension, and it's almost like, I mean, it is in a way, it's almost like a volcano, right? Where it's like, okay, there's tension, okay, there's tension, and then it all just, I mean, then it just explodes. I mean, you can say that about a lot of things. I mean, I feel like, I feel like the War of the Five Kings is there's not really, I mean, it's like 2 moments, and then it's just like all hell breaks loose. But this is like crafted over years, and it's like, oh, and it's like, okay, and then it just explodes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you actually have that same kind of thing going on with Viserys and Daemon. So these 2 brothers, like, he mocks the death of his infant son, who was what he said, heir for a day or heir for however many days or whatever, and he mocks him in the streets. And then he's he kind of throws in, he uses, so Corlys Velaryon, again, his family was kind of passed over for Viserys, in that, like, when the old king decided who was going to be heir, they passed over him. And so to kind of heal that, his daughter is put forward as one of those people that Viserys should marry. And again, he is slighted a little bit. So Daemon Targaryen will actually, once Alicent Hightower shows up and starts having kids, and he's pushed further and further down the line, you do see kind of like what you're saying is like this, there's a flare up, and then then they reconcile, and then Daemon gets pissed again, and then he and Viserys reconcile again. So anyways, at one of these points, Daemon will actually go to Lord Corlys Velaryon, and he goes and does his own thing. Actually, he goes and makes war and tries to become, I think he does become, right, air quote, king of the Stepstones, and has to come back and apologize for it, which is crazy. So yeah, it's just, you're totally right that there's that back and forth between these brothers.
Right, and you just have to think about it, because it's one of the things that, as we know, it's really, it's a rough outline of what happens. Again, other than really Dunk and Egg, this is the most kind of told story. It's World of Ice and Fire, Fire and Blood, and you get the 2 novellas. But I mean, this is one of those things where it's like, okay, we hear he becomes the king of the Stepstones, but in the show they'll be able to expand on it a lot more and say, well, was he taking over the Stepstones to possibly launch an invasion later? Like, well, if I take this, kind of like how we see with like Dany, right? Well, she takes over Marine, she's building kind of this following and army. Like, is that something we're going to see as well? Or is it, well, he just kind of takes it over and, yeah, my bad. So there's a lot of stuff that as we're reading through these tiny little paragraphs of what happens, I think we need to think about, like, well, what does this brief little time period look like if it's expanded into like 4 or 5 episodes?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, I even think about, as I mentioned, Daemon, when you see him, from his point of view. Again, a lot of the stuff that we get is like rumors. Daemon said this. Did Daemon actually say that? It's like he was heard mocking the king's son in some tavern or some inn, but we know from the main series that, and where we get a lot more, we're actually kind of privy to a lot more points of view, and we hear dialogue from characters. The still stuff gets kind of construed, and there's rumors, and you have to worry about unreliable narrators and things like that. So you got to wonder, from Fire and Blood and from these maesters retelling the story, the influence of mushroom, court gestures, and things like that. Like, and then also you look at who wins, right? I mean, is there a better telling of this time period based upon ultimately this conflict between the blacks and the greens, and who won it and who then got to kind of write that history book?
Exactly.
That's something to think about. But you're right. You can look at these moments and blow them up and expand on these and really see what this was like. We might see Daemon meeting with Corlys Velaryon and them talking about what they're going to do. We never really see what their actual intent is going to be. Is it just to gain power and influence and what have you? We know that the free cities were actually noticing a coolness between the blacks and the greens. And then you've got Daemon over here as this wild card building up this force and taking over a land. So it started to be this time of tension. It's cooled back down. 5-year tourney celebrating Alicent Hightower and Viserys' wedding. They have a 5-year tourney. They get together, and Daemon. Where we're going to leave it today is basically Daemon kind of comes back and he apologizes, and that tension is cooled. But you can see how just in part 2, and as you said, with Viserys being cast, are we going to have a whole season on his reign and his life? You know what I mean? Is that going to be the first 2 seasons, or how much time are we going to spend exploring his reign and watch this tension kind of build? Because he is that guy you got to focus on. We're going to cover him in 3 parts, but this could be several seasons worth and build us to a maximum huge, like, big war.
Right.
Or you jump right to it in season 1 and you go into all the stuff that happens in the actual war. There's a lot that happens, lots of battles, lots of things to cover.
It's tough. I mean, it's tough. Man, I don't know where you go. I think you kind of go towards almost the end of his life, and then it's like, just because once he dies is when everything, like, okay, he's kind of really like the peacekeeper, kind of somewhat loosely holding this all together before literally everything everything breaks loose. And the problem with this for a series, with Game of Thrones, right, everything happens in order, whereas there's a lot of time in between, so they're either going to do time jumps or kind of retell it in a different way where it's all kind of one event. So we'll certainly see as it unfolds, and once maybe once we get some more castings and we can begin to say, like, well, how old does this guy look? Are they going to somebody younger because they plan on him being around for 8 seasons or something like that, and we can begin to see. My guess is that the show will be similar to Game of Thrones. Probably they're looking at 8 seasons, 10 episodes a season, 8 episodes a season, somewhere in that ballpark.
Wow, that'd be great. I'd be all for it.
Yeah, as